Audio Jungle.
Recession likely in 2018. American consumers turning pessimistic. American consumers foretelling a recession ahead. Remember these words: without American consumers, the U.S. economy doesn't go very far. If Americans become pessimistic, a recession follows. It's that simple. Sadly, as it stands, we are seeing something interesting happening among American consumers. They are losing confidence in the U.S. economy, their jobs prospects, and other related things. What's interesting to note here is that this is happening as stocks are at their all-time highs. Economic data says the U.S. economy is marching ahead just fine, and politicians tell us that sunny days are ahead. Investors beware. Don't ignore the consumer confidence statistics, they could be foretelling a recession ahead. Consumer confidence index continued to decline. Look at the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. In January, the index tracking how confident Americans are dropped to 94.4. There's one more thing, this index has been dropping since November. And January's level was the lowest since July 2017. Source: Consumer Sentiment Slides for third straight month. The Wall Street Journal, January 19, 2018. Here's the thing. If it were just one indicator of consumer confidence declining, it may not have been that worrisome. But others are declining as well. This essentially means pessimistic sentiment is widespread in the U.S. economy. Look at the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index as well. In December, this index dropped 122.1 from 128.6 in November. Regarding the decline, Lynn Franco, the director of economic indicators at the Conference Board, said the decline in confidence was fueled by a somewhat less optimistic outlook for business and job prospects in the coming months. Source: the Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index declined. The Conference Board, December 27, 2017. Why economic slowdown or outright recession could be likely in 2018. Dear reader, it's very critical to understand what this all means. You see, when consumers turn pessimistic, they stop buying things. When consumers aren't buying, businesses don't sell. This leads to business losses, unemployment, and more. Obviously, it takes a while for all this to happen. I warn you, if consumer sentiment continues to fall, a recession in the overall U.S. economy could become inevitable. Just look at the chart below. It shows personal consumption in the U.S. This is consumer spending, divided by U.S. gross domestic product, GDP. In other words, it shows how reliant the U.S. economy is on consumer spending. Source: personal consumption expenditures / gross domestic product, Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Last access January 19, 2018. 70% of U.S. GDP is consumer spending. What do you think will happen to the GDP growth rate if consumers all of a sudden don't spend, as they did before? Let us do some extrapolation. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are about 117.71 million households in the U.S. If we assume that each household just spends $100.00 less each month, and they did before, this figure amasses to over $11.77 billion a month. If you annualize it, you are looking at a roughly $141.2 billion impact on the overall consumer spending figure. Looking at all this, it's very hard to be optimistic about the U.S. economy. As I see it, the stars are lining up for an economic slowdown. or an outright recession in the U.S., rather than growth in 2018. Death of the dollar watch. Pakistan preemptively ditches the US dollar for the Chinese yuan. The entire world is quickly not wanting anything to do with the US military empire, or the dollar, and in this latest example, this time it has different. First, President Trump fired off this tweet on New Year's Day. Then the next day, the president singles out the Palestinians, but informs anybody who missed the prior day's tweet that Pakistan is on the hot seat. The word making the rounds in the MSM is that President Trump will cut off or restrict U.S. aid to Pakistan. According to multiple news agencies, an announcement is expected today. Not waiting for specific announcements or actions from the U.S., Pakistan is taking matters into their own hands, in what can only be summed up as ditching the dollar for the Chinese yuan. Here's MSM outlet CNBC. A day after President Donald Trump slammed Pakistan on Twitter, the South Asian nation announced it will replace the dollar with yuan for bilateral trade with Beijing. As U.S.-Pakistan relations grow increasingly strained, China has been pursuing closer links with the country. We have been following the pivot away from the US dollar from some time, but this time, it is possible to say this time it is different. Yes, we get it, such a garbage cliche, but we're not talking about the stock market bubble or the Bitcoin bubble here. We are talking about a nation that actually possesses nuclear weapons. Last year we saw pivots from the usual sanctions-laden nations such as Iran, North Korea and Venezuela, but this time, the move has been in advance of any adverse action that U.S. foreign policy might take against Pakistan. In addition, Pakistan is a member of the United Nations and a NATO partner across the globe. So again, we're not talking about some rogue nation, but a nation with a nuclear arsenal, and, generally speaking, a global player, albeit of limited pull and weight in the world. Nonetheless, Pakistan just hammered another nail into the coffin of the US dollar. Here's more from CNBC. A day after the US leaders slammed Islamabad for harboring terrorists, in a New Year's Day tweet, Pakistan's central bank announced that it will be replacing the dollar with the yuan for bilateral trade and investment with Beijing. The same day, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang defended Islamabad's counter-terrorism track record, saying the country made great efforts and sacrifices for combating terrorism, and urged the international community to fully recognize this. China has been watching closely as U.S.-Pakistan relations become increasingly strained. Trump has long demanded the frontier economy to do more on counterterrorism, while he simultaneously grew closer to its arch-rival, India. Pakistan and the U.S. have had a fraught relationship for years, but the big change recently has been China, said Simon Baptist, Asia Regional Director at the Economist Intelligence Unit. China has really gone hard in cementing its existing relationship with Pakistan. It is really the only place that has seen significant investment under the Belt and Road Initiative, and China has been pushing for geopolitical advantage there. Islamabad is home to one of Beijing's central infrastructure schemes, the near $60 billion collection of land and sea projects known as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a centerpiece of Belt and Road. So it is different this time. We are not talking about nations that are on the United States' let us go to war with bucket list, or Venezuela, which the possibility of military action last year wasn't entirely ruled out anyway by President Trump himself, who actually said the U.S. has not ruled out military action. We are talking about a key player in regional geopolitics, which also happens to be a major player in China, as politicians tell us that sunny days are ahead. Investors beware. Don't ignore the consumer confidence statistics, they could be foretelling a recession ahead. Consumer confidence index continued to decline. Look at the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. In January, the index tracking how confident
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Recession likely in 2018. American consumers turning pessimistic. American consumers foretelling a recession ahead. Remember these words: without American consumers, the U.S. economy doesn't go very far. If Americans become pessimistic, a recession follows. It's that simple. Sadly, as it stands, we Americans are dropped to 94.4. There's one more thing. This index has been dropping since November. And January's level was the lowest since July 2017. Source: Consumer Sentiment Slides for third straight month. The Wall Street Journal, January 19, 20. Are seeing something interesting happening among American consumers. They are losing confidence in the U.S. economy, their jobs prospects, and other related things. What's interesting to note here is that this is happening as stocks are at their all-time highs. Economic data says the U.S. economy is marching ahead just fine, and